good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are around the world. Welcome to today's Postgrad webinar session. Today we are joined by the University of Westminster, specifically to hear about their postgraduate economics offerings, which is going to be really exciting because they're in central London. It's a really popular topic, is economics at the moment, and we're going to hear from not only Karen, who's course leader and reader in economics, but we're also going to hear from Dr. Rebecca Wang, who's assistant head of school, who very excitingly, we're going to be joined by a postgrad economics student, Solomon, who his background is an African student. So if you are watching today and you can relate to that and you're interested in finding out more from them, please do ask the questions. If you're watching on Zoom today, there's a chat facility at the bottom. Please feel free to say hi and where you're from. We also have a Q&A box as well. Please ensure you put your questions in that box. If you put your questions in that box, we do have a Q&A session later today. In around about 45 minutes time, we will make sure that we will get round to your question. And if you are watching on social media today, whether it be Facebook or Instagram, please pop your question in the Messenger portal. The question comes through as a host, so we will get that question. I'm very excited to hand you over to Dr. Karen Jackson for the next 30 to 45 minutes, and I'll be back for the Q&A. Have fun, and if you have any questions, let us know. Karen, over to you.
Thank you, Gareth. Welcome everyone to this webinar. I'm the course leader for one of the courses we're going to talk about today, which is the MSc in Economics. I'm also a reader in Economics in Westminster Business School. And I'd just like to introduce my colleagues who are joining me today. So over to you, Rebecca.
Hello everyone, I'm Rebecca, an assistant head of school of one of the schools within Westminster Business School.
Great. And I think Solomon's also here with us today, so he might be able to just introduce himself briefly.
Hello, my name is Solomon Kofo, a postgraduate student in the MSc Economic Policy and Analysis at the University of Westminster. I'm glad to be here.
Lovely. Thank you so much. So we're going to hear more from them later on. And in the meantime, just let me explain how today's webinar is going to work. So I'm going to give you a short mini lecture. We're then going to introduce the courses within the economics area. We're then going to have a conversation between Rebecca and Solomon. And then, as mentioned before, there's going to be plenty of time to answer any of your questions, which you can put into the Q&A box. So if you'd like to get started by just explaining in the chat where you're joining us from today, that would be great because it would give us an idea of our audience. Okay, so the lecture that I want to share with you is particularly selected because it's a topic that many of you will have heard about either through your classes that you've done already or through what you've read in the newspapers, etc. So I would like to talk about tariffs. I would like to talk about why they're back in a big way. And I would like to talk about why this signals a significant shift in the return of protectionism. I've also picked this topic because myself and my colleague Rebecca Torres have written a paper recently that was just published in this space. So if you'd like to read a little bit more upon this topic, as well as seeing the coverage in the general media, you can also follow this link to our paper. This is also the paper that I gave the students in my module to look at this year. So this module that I'm referring to is International Trade Policy. This is a really short, cut down version of what some of the content I've covered to students taking my module this year. So let me start off with the context of this mini lecture. So I'm arguing that while you can look back in history and you can see that almost every American president has used tariffs to some extent, they were much more limited. So the current US administration under President Trump is using tariff policy in a very different way than what we've seen before. So previously you would see tariffs on steel, for example, that would make imported steel more expensive. So it would mean that when you were importing steel, there'd be an extra cost that would sometimes, in part at least, be passed on to the consumers of the steel, and that steel might be used to produce cars. What I'm suggesting now is that this tariff program that we've seen from President Trump in his second term is actually very broad. It often actually covers all products imported from a country. It's therefore quite an aggressive policy, and it's not time limited. So many of the earlier programs of other presidents were actually, it was much clearer that there was a limited time where the tariffs were going to be imposed. It's also very heavily linked to the idea of reshoring. Now, reshoring, if you're not familiar with it, means that basically there's a desire to see business return to the US. There's a desire to see investment in businesses in the United States. There's also a lot of talk about the idea of national identity, sovereignty. There's a lot of uncertainty. I'm going to talk a bit more about what type of uncertainty. There's also been a lot of retaliation. And of course, therefore, this does in fact impact on the welfare of people, not just in the US, but also other countries. So if you would like to actually get down to the specifics of understanding the tariffs that are going to be imposed and that have been imposed previously, you can actually track this using various means, but one of them is the Financial Times tracker. I've given you the link here. So the sort of lighter turquoise line is the ones that have been announced, and the black line is the actual trade. This, by the way, is the overall US tariff rate across all trading partners. So this is not specific to China. So this is not about just Chinese imports. This is the average rate across all of the American partners. So how do these tariff rates compare to what we've seen previously? Well, these tariff rates are the highest we've seen since the 1930s. The 1930s saw really high tariff rates because of the Great Depression, referred to as the Great Depression because it was the most significant economically negative event the world had ever seen till that point. And the tariffs were very high during that time. We haven't seen anything like this until now. So this is a really big shock. So how does then President Trump kind of talk about tariffs? Well, first of all, tariffs are a favored policy by President Trump. This is something that he talked about in his first term, and it's something that he talks about at length. It's not that it's the only policy he uses. There are export restrictions, for example, in the area of chips. If you were looking to sell chips, export chips from the US to China, you would see lots of restrictions. But tariffs are a really favored policy. So tariffs mean, as I said before, the thing that you're importing has then a percentage, usually a percentage increase of price on it. Some of that is passed on to the consumer. I've included a quote here to suggest that President Trump has said to me, the most beautiful word in the dictionary is tariff, and it's my favorite word. There's an extensive array of quotations of President Trump talking about tariffs. What does this mean in terms of us looking at it as an economic policy? This means that actually he sees this more than a technical tool. It's more than an economic tool for President Trump. It's really part of his political identity. And what's important is that it also echoes back to one of the earliest trade theories we talk about in trade modules, which is mercantilist thought. Mercantilists really believe that you want to export as much as you can because you export and people give you money for what you export and you build your wealth. So the US becomes wealthier if they export more, and you try to import less because as you import, you have to pay for those imports, and therefore you try to reduce this. So in fact, this is what we sometimes call the zero-sum framing of trade. President Trump likes to talk about not wanting deficits, but wanting a surplus. It's really about winning versus losing. It's very much a business person's perspective over the idea of trade being related to the profits and losses that you would think about for business. So this mercantilist thought, this mercantilist thinking, that's a very old way of thinking about trade and largely dismissed by trade economists, is nevertheless very popular in the political discourse right now. And so really we're seeing trade being talked about in the same way that a businessman thinks about its profits and loss. Now we're talking about winning versus losing. So when do these ideas of mercantilism start to become very talked about? Well, we tend to see them very talked about when we're thinking about geopolitical rivalry, when we're thinking about national boundaries and trying to think about the US identity, trying to think about the growth prospects of the likes of the US, thinking about national security concerns, which has been talked about. We think about trade routes and we often hear about national security concerns. We often also see that inequality within a country, steelworkers being concerned about their wages and their jobs, that often triggers discontent. That's often around the time of an election that politicians want to win the votes of the steelworkers, and therefore we see that tariffs are used. We've also seen at the same time a decline in the importance of the World Trade Organization. I talk about that a lot more in the module I teach. So we also tend to see that mercantilist thinking is often tied to economic shocks. Economic shocks can come from wars, of which unfortunately we have a number at the moment. We can also have economic shocks which are familiar to people in the UK in particular, such as Brexit, the decision to leave the EU. That caused an economic shock that was not only felt in the UK, but also felt elsewhere in the world. So we have this resurgence of mercantilism. And what does this mean? How does this change things? What's the impact of this? Well, one of the interesting quotes that I thought I'd share with you today is one from Professor Paul Krugman, who won the Nobel Prize in economics. And he describes how he considers this to be equivalent to the end of North America in production terms. So he says that just the other day, there was no such thing as American manufacturing, Canadian manufacturing, or Mexican manufacturing. So there was no such thing, for example, as a US car, a US made car. It was a North American car. And so the idea is now that this trade policy has also targeted friendly nations nearby, Canada and Mexico. And therefore, what we see is that we're going to have to shift to talking about American cars. And why was it we were talking about North American production, North American cars? It was because that was an efficient way to produce things. So the change has taken place where these tariffs are not only broader based, are not only time unlimited, but they're also different because they're targeting trade partners, such as Canada and Mexico, among many others. So this is actually quite fundamental because Canada and Mexico in particular, and I would even focus further and say Mexico, was used in an effort to try and reduce reliance on China. Companies were encouraged to move from places like China and move their production to Mexico to be closer to the US and to take account of the friendly relations between the US and Mexico. So this latest tariff changes have actually really changed this approach. So people no longer think, well, I'm going to move my company to Mexico because actually it's no longer the case that Mexico is an obvious location where you're going to benefit from friendly access to the US market. So did it all work in short? So one thing was that there was an attempt through this policy to try to move production back to the US. Now, admittedly, I'm going to caveat my opinion on this because that takes time. So it's very unlikely we would see significant changes to companies moving back to the US right now, but it's true to say that we haven't got much evidence of that. We have got evidence over recent years of companies moving to Mexico, but we haven't got the evidence of significant investment in the US. We have got evidence of average prices across the US going up. We call this inflationary pressure. This is, of course, talked about widely also in the context of Europe due to other reasons. But in the context of the US, we certainly see some evidence that these tariffs have created higher prices to consumers and created inflationary pressures. We also see that supply chains have been impacted by this. The trading environment has become more uncertain. We also see that there has been one policy announcement one day, and there's been then a backtracking or a change in that policy announcement. It's often also very unclear what the tariffs are going to mean in practice. Finally, the other thing that we know is that there was a prediction of how much tariff revenue would be collected, and the American public were told that this would be invested in important projects and within the US. Now, we can see that tariff revenue has gone up, but it's not gone up as much as was expected at the beginning of this tariff shock. So I want to leave there my mini lecture. I leave you with that as a taster. Hopefully you found the topic interesting. Hopefully when you read more about this in the press, you'll be able to relate to it better. It may follow on from what you've already studied previously. And if you're interested, you can have the full lecture from me as part of the International Trade Policy module in Central London next academic year. So I would like to take the opportunity now to tell you a little bit about the MSc in Economics, which I'm the course leader for, and I'll also flag a number of the other courses that might be of interest. So the MSc in Economics has both September and January starts. We've decided very deliberately to call this an MSc in Economics rather than an MSc in Digital Economics. But we see digital economics as being crucially important at this point in time for modern MSc in Economics. We've therefore made digital economics and data critical to this programme. I'm going to explain to you how that has been designed into the program. I'm also going to describe to you about the Bloomberg Labs that you will get to use, the Bloomberg certificate, which is key to the program. I'm going to explain also more about the different modules, but I want to now explain that there are actually no exams within this course. This particular course is very much focused on applied work-facing tasks, not exams. We call these authentic assessments. They're designed, all of the tasks you'll be given within the context of this course will aim towards preparing you for work and giving you tasks which are meaningfully connected to the types of things you will see in a work-based environment. I'm going to explain a bit more also about the dedicated professional development module we have included. But first, let me just tell you a bit more about the people who will be teaching you on the MSc in Economics if you come to study with us. So one of the important things about the staff on the programme is that we engage with not just a lot of research, but we engage with research which has impact. And in fact, this impact has been measured. So we have a research excellence framework in the UK. This is a UK-wide exercise where we are assessed on the quality of not just the research, but the impact our research has. So in the UK, when we submitted our case studies, we were ranked second out of 108 submissions in the UK in business management for research impact. What does that tell you? It tells you that we have work going on, research going on, which is not just an outcome for the sake of doing research, but it actually changes something outside the academic environment. And we are able to demonstrate that to the extent that we were ranked second in the UK for the type of impact that our research has. And it's that we bring back into the classroom. And half of these impact case studies were actually submitted and led by economists. So the economics group in Westminster Business School is very strong in both research and research impact, and that will feed in to your student experience when you're studying with us. So I'd like to just tell you a little bit about how we structure the course. The top left is the core theory modules, so that won't be surprising to anybody who studied economics before. It's macroeconomics and microeconomics. On the bottom left, I then mentioned the data analysis and research component of what you'll be taught. That's econometrics, that's research methods, and a capstone project of your economics project, which will be at the end of the course. On the top right, you'll see that these are the applied modules that you'll be taught. We focus on international. A lot of our students come from overseas, and therefore it's important to focus on international policy. It's important to build up expertise in that area. You'll be studying international economy and financial markets. That's where you'll start to think about things like Bloomberg and using that data. You'll study international trade policy with me, and there's a bespoke module in digital economics and big data. Then on the bottom right, this is a more unique offering as part of our course. We made the decision to actually incorporate a professional development for economists module within the course, and I'll explain a bit more about that in a moment. So the digital side, I'm just going to take a very minute or two to just explain exactly how that features in the course. So first of all, we do see this as being a very important asset in a modern MSc in economics. We have both the dedicated module in digital economics and big data, but then we embed these concepts across the course. One of the key ways is that we want you to be able to download data. I'll talk about the Bloomberg data in particular in a moment. We want you, though, to be able to take these ideas from the theory modules and also the applied modules, and we want you to be able to translate those ideas into visualizations and tell a story, which is easy to understand for people who are not experts in economics. So what we do is we embed these skills and the skill development throughout the course. So how do you do that? You do have to use some relatively technical platforms. So you do need to be taught how to use R and Stata, and that will happen across the course, but it will allow you to be able to develop really cool data visualizations that will be able to bring across your ideas to non-specialists. So a little bit more about the Bloomberg Labs. The interesting story about these in the Westminster context is that we were actually the first British university to incorporate Bloomberg Labs into our university. We have among the largest in the world facilities for Bloomberg in universities. And this is really important for students that might be doing an MSc in economics, but consider their future in the area of finance or banking. It is a critical tool used in that industry. It's really important that you get the skills when you're studying so that you can really segue into work. You can demonstrate those skills by completing the Bloomberg Market Concept Certificate, and actually this is part of the assessment for one of your modules in our course. So you will use Bloomberg, but you'll be able to demonstrate your understanding. Finally, I would just like to highlight the professional experience module. This is designed by economists for people studying economics. So it's not a generic professional module. The idea is that you build your professional identity. We know some of you will want to be economists, but we also know some of you will want to study in related careers. And we will help you develop your professional identity in what you see as being your future career. Some of you might be sitting here thinking you want to do a PhD. The module will also help support you to develop your ideas around a future PhD. You'll be given networking opportunities. You'll learn some networking skills. Some of you may think you're really great at it already, but you might develop more skills. That might be a weakness for you. You'll get support through this module. You'll get help with actually projecting yourself professionally with LinkedIn, developing your CV, which is critical for when you're applying for a job. You'll hear from Solomon later how he's used also the career support beyond this module in helping him and how this changed the outcome of his job applications. We'll also give you an idea of the recruitment cycle for roles related to your degree. The idea is that when you leave the MSc in Economics, you really are work ready. Both because you'll be doing authentic assessments, which are the types of things you'll see in the workplace, and also through all the skills development that you'll do going through the course with your digital and data skills, and also this embedded module for professional experience. So to find out more information on the MSc in Economics, you can scan this code. I'll come back to it later while we're hearing from Solomon and Rebecca. I will please also on the right-hand side, there's a QR code where you can connect with me. It has my email address. I am very happy to answer questions from anybody. You can just email me directly after this webinar and ask me any questions. I'll be very pleased to hear from you. We have two other courses. One on the left-hand side with this QR code is Economic Policy and Analysis MSc. This will be explained in a bit more detail from Solomon, who's currently studying this course. You can scan the code and read more. We also have a course which is International Development Management MSc, and again, you can scan the code to learn more. Just very quickly, I want to highlight where we are in London. So we are in Marylebone, which is opposite Regent's Park. You couldn't be more central in London. So for anybody who isn't familiar with this, hasn't visited London before, this is very central. You're 10 minutes walk from the main shopping street and you're beside Baker Street, which is famous for Sherlock Holmes. As I mentioned, we have these Bloomberg Labs on our campus. You'd be based at Marylebone for all your teaching. You can use our library, which is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, but you can also use all the libraries on all of our campuses interchangeably. You might have a friend who's at another campus, you can use the other library. There are a range of student trips. I think you'll hear more about these from Solomon. Solomon is actually on the left-hand side of this picture. This trip took place a couple of weeks ago to the United Nations International Maritime Organization. We do lots of different field trips, and you'll hear about some of them from Solomon. You also can access, as I said, all the other campuses. This is our Regent Street campus, which is our original campus dating back almost 200 years. In this campus, you can go to use the gym free of charge, and you can use the cinema. This is the first cinema in the UK. So it's a really nice old cinema that we maintain as part of our premises. This campus is only 10 to 15 minutes walking away from where you will study at Marylebone. So now I hand over to my colleague Rebecca and to Solomon.
Thank you, Karen. Hi, everyone. To give you a real sense of what studying economics at Westminster Business School is like, I'm delighted to be joined by Solomon. He's going to offer his first-hand experience of the learning environment and what it's like to be part of our community. So, hi, Solomon. First of all, what attracted you to the postgraduate study in economics at Westminster?
Okay, thank you. So, from my love for economics, I had already studied a bachelor's degree in economics from Ghana, and I already had an MPhil in economics. But I got a job with a trade institute in Ghana, Africa Trade Academy, where I was a trade policy analyst. So, after about some months of working, I realized that to be able to progress in my career, I would need an economic policy centered on international trade course to help me. So I went on the search for a lot of schools, shortlisted some schools. Because of my background, I wasn't only looking at the location and other things. To me, the most important was the core content of the course, the modules that were treated, which Karen has mentioned some of them with the new MSc Economics program. And then the second factor that was so highly determined was the fees. So these two, the course content and the fees, together with my passion for economics and to become a very good international policy analyst, made me take up a second postgraduate program in economics, particularly at the University of Westminster.
Thank you, Solomon. And like many international students, before they joined their study at Westminster, they have some work experiences actually which benefits their study and enable them to share their international experiences during our study. So that is really good to know. So what has your experience been like so far at Westminster? What do you enjoy most? Any extra curriculum activities?
Yes, my stay so far at Westminster has been very, 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 very fruitful, very rewarding. Before my job at Africa Trade, I was in academia, I was lecturing, so I really value pastoral teaching of students, and that's what I've enjoyed so much at the University of Westminster. Academically, the feedback from my module leaders, how open they are to discussions to help you with your independent learning, has groomed me for the past 6 months that I've been in the UK. And for extracurricular activities, the tennis court and my trips. Rebecca and Karen mentioned that we take some trips. Yes, we took a trip to the Portico port. That was my first trip outside London, where as part of the trip, I got to know what goes on, what happens at the port, at the international port. And that deepened my understanding of workings of international trade and how ports can be used successfully in international trade.
Mm. Yes, at Westminster, student experiences are at the heart of everything we do. So, as Solomon mentioned, the pastoral and academic support offered by your personal tutor, your course leader, your module leaders are immense, right? But have you used some other careers and employability services at Westminster? Any other, student support services that you find very beneficial for your study?
Yes, I have. Dr. Jackson's last statement was Westminster makes you work ready. I think it's very true. So when I got into the UK, I was looking for part-time jobs. I sent my CVs, they were rejected. I wasn't having any call. But then I used the career zone and zone 29, the career and employability section of the university that helps a student. I use the career set to evaluate my CV. They gave me recommendations where I need to improve. I did that. I resubmitted the CV. And for the first time in about 2 months that I've been sending lots of CVs to employers, I got shortlisted. Then finally, I got interviewed. Still with the career and employability, I got assistance with my interview tips and then got employed as a part-time teaching assistant.
That is excellent to know. So congratulations, Solomon, on
Thank you,
getting the
Rebecca.
internship. Yeah. So you mentioned the Zoom 29, which is the career hub and which will offer all our students career support services. Yeah. And do you have any plans upon graduation?
Yes, I do have big plans. I want to be in academia. I want to be a university teacher and a researcher policy analyst. So after my days in Westminster, I look forward to pursuing a PhD in economics with focus on international trade and labor economics, so that maybe the next 2, 3 years for webinar, instead of Dr. One, I'll be the one describing the module. Yeah. And my module
Excellent.
leaders and my personal tutor have been very good because when I discuss with them my career ambitions, they've already started sharing with me PhD opportunities and we're having discussions around it.
Yeah. Thank you, Solomon. And Karen, do you have any questions for Solomon at this stage?
I would just like to ask one further question because there might be students here who are thinking about studying in the UK and may not have visited the UK before, or may have visited but are coming from overseas. And given that you've gone through this experience and I wondered if you might like to just share what the challenges were and how you overcame them in the practical things around applying. Did you have any help for applying? Did you need help? Did you find the process of getting the visa straightforward? Any kind of hints and tips about that process that might be interesting insight for potential students?
Okay, thank you. Although there are agencies and educational institutions that facilitate application for other students, I did it myself. The DIY, I did it myself. And at any point, I was in contact with the admissions team. So I had all the help I needed. If I was having any challenges, I'll send them an email and prompt, I get a response. Till I got my CAS. Then when I was applying for the visa to, at any point, if I needed any help, I'll still reach out to the admissions team and the student center. Then I got all the help. So it was quite straightforward for me. And from my classmates as well, I've not heard anyone that said he or she had any difficulty with applying to the school. If anyone had mentioned visa, probably they had issues with their documents or other things. But once it was rectified, it was quite easy for everybody once you follow the right rules.
No, I think that's very reassuring for people because I think sometimes the thought of all the steps can be quite overwhelming, but it's reassuring to know that if you just keep asking as you go along, you get through the steps and that you've compared your experience. One of the things thought that also might be interesting for people listening is maybe explaining a bit more about how, did you, for example, benefit from the scheme where you can pay your fees over a longer period? Can you just give some sense of any challenges around that and how you manage the process within your finances?
Okay, thank you. So I mentioned earlier that one of the reasons why I chose the University of Westminster was the least fees, high, very affordable. And in addition to that, there is a postgraduate excellence award where you can apply for and get some grants up to £5,000 for international students. After I was awarded a £3,000, I still have some amount to pay. But when I got into school, I was given a payment plan very flexible so that I don't have to use all my funds as an international student to pay the remaining fees. So I can have time for and the peace of mind to study. So I was given a payment plan at which at a point I could still not meet it. I went forward, discussed with them, and it was still extended for me. So the payment plan for me and other international students, very flexible. The fees are moderate, and you are still given a payment plan to go by if you are not able to pay your fees at a certain time, unlike other universities.
Yeah, I've also heard that comment from other fellow students of yours from the postgraduate program that they have made quite good use of the payment plans on offer. So yeah, no, thanks for that. Thank you, Solomon.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's good to know. So, Solomon, any other advice you would like to give to a potential student considering applying to study postgraduates, study economics at Westminster? Perhaps something you wish you had known before starting your studies with us.
Okay. So the first thing I would want to tell anybody here who wants to apply is that you are making the right choice applying to the University of Westminster. The module leaders are very good. Trino, all the others, the courses are very good. What I wish I knew was I underestimated the policy writing aspect of the program because I had already done an MPhil. I was better in academic writing, not so policy straightforward. But when I came to the University of Westminster, I realized that no, in the early days, my friend, need to be doing more policy writing, not an academic report. So I adjusted myself quickly. I started reading more policy reports, going online to help. And with my module leaders, some of them share sample policy reports with the class. So I looked at it and I can say I'm now better. So I wished I knew I would have started reading more policy reports that do quite analysis. So my advice to you, all students or people that want to come to, is that revise your economics. If you have not done economics before, just revise your little statistics and read some policy reports so that when you come in, you are good to go. And once you adjust, I'm telling you, and I am assuring you as a student, the course will be rewarding, it will be fulfilling, and you'd see that you have really built yourself up for a career either in academics or in the professional world.
Rebecca, Karen, I believe we're going to take a few questions now, if that's okay. Thank you to all of you. And Solomon, if we can have you back on screen as well, that would be fantastic, just so we can get a student's perspective as well with some of these questions. Um, One of the first, I'm going to work back to front with some of these questions. They come in on social media, so apologies. I'm going to have to paraphrase if it's not what you meant. Please do let me know. Do I live in Westminster or can I live on the outskirts of the capital city? I think what they're probably getting at there, Karen, if I can start with you, is there will be many students that will not be able to afford to live in central London. Therefore, given the logistics of the trains, the tube, the buses, the infrastructure as a whole, there will be students that no doubt will live outside of London and travel in. Will that be right?
Yeah, actually, it's a great question. We do have student halls which are by London standards relatively affordable, so it's good to look into those. That can be a nice way to obviously be housed with other students. I understand that when students come, they often don't have friends that they can necessarily flat share with. But yeah, it's very normal to travel in. We're actually our campus is extremely close to Marylebone train station. So that's actually a good one to look at and to see the different places you can live outside London, which would come into Marylebone train station. But we are very centrally located to around a number of train stations. Paddington's not far away, King's Cross and St Pancras. So it's really common for staff and for students to travel in from other places outside London and then to come into one of those stations, which are walkable distance to the campus.
Yeah, and obviously it's all depending on the student's circumstances, isn't it? I'm guessing, Solomon, your experience as well. You're going to have perhaps friends that you've made and people that you've spoken to that will be from not all over London, but will be from various different countries and won't be used to living in a capital city. Therefore, they've had to adapt. Is that right?
Yeah, yes, that is very, very right. I think so. In my class, out of 100%, just about 20% live in central London. The rest of us, including myself, we live outside central London. But because of the transport system in the UK and because of benefits to students like the Oyster card, the rail card subsidies, we are able to commute from where we are to the campus. Even when our lectures start at 9 a.m., you are still able to meet it. When we close late, you are still able to meet it. So it is not a big issue, dependent on the student circumstances. If your finances would not permit you, you might have to stay a little bit outside of London. If you have the finances, you can stay inside London and enjoy everything in London. But if you do not, you still have the opportunity to spend less on discounted rail cards, discounted student Oyster cards, still live outside London.
Excellent. Solomon, I'm going to keep with you for this question, then I'll move on to Rebecca and then
Okay.
Karen. Rank two is great. How big are the classes? I'd like more personal learning. One of the things that struck me, Solomon, was the very hands-on approach from the university. While they're educating you, they like to look after you, and then post-graduation, they also like to look after you. So, presumably, such a big university will have big class sizes. How do you feel? How do you feel about the academics, about the learning? Do you feel like you know them well? Do you feel there's a personal aspect there?
Yes, I for my module leaders, I think the class sizes are very small. Like in my class, for instance, we are about 13.
Yeah.
Yes, the other class where the class size is quite big, the seminar times that we have has divided the class into quite smaller classes. So you are still able to integrate and get to know your classmates among everything. So it's not the class size quite smaller, and that gives you a personal relation with the module leader you are talking about. So if, for instance, in my class, almost every single person has quite of a close relation with the module leader because they go to them for discussions. You send an email, you book Teams meeting with them all the time. It's not too big. compared to other universities
No.
and from where we are coming from, where you don't even get a close relation with the module leader. So that I can assure all students of that. Once you make yourself available, you are good to go.
Yeah, and Rebecca, can I come to you next on that same point? Because so many people will presume that Westminster, large university in London, all the classes are going to be 90 to 100 people. You're not going to get to know your students. I mean, Solomon's just put that to bed a little bit, but I want to give you the chance to kind of talk about your students and talk about how close you get to their education and how getting to know them can help you as well.
Yes, thank you for the question. So first of all, the teaching method at Westminster, like many other universities, include lectures and seminars. So lectures, you might have a chance to meet the students from other courses, so which tend to be slightly bigger. But then after the lecture, students will be divided into much smaller seminar groups where students will have a lot of opportunities to interact with the seminar tutor and other students and to share their learning experiences. So this is about the teaching method. And the second, in order to support our students, every student, in addition to have their course leader, module leader, seminar tutor, they will be also allocated a personal tutor who offer pastoral support. And in addition to all these support from academics, we also have a student center, which offers 24/7 call and live chat and online services. So the support offered by university is very much
Yeah.
personalized and taking
Um,
into, yeah.
yeah. Thank you. Sorry to cut you off a bit there, Rebecca. Karen, can I come back to you? One of the questions that's been asked is, what would you suggest a good course at bachelor's level be for this kind of program? Now, obviously, we're talking a whole broad range of economics programs here, but typically, what would you expect that to look like for a student?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a really good question, and I particularly, as the course leader, make it a priority to actually look at each and every application we receive for the course. So I do have a good sense of what applications we receive. Um, it would be probably fair to say that about half of the students have previously done a degree where they have economics in the title in some way. But then there's actually probably the other half where they might have done a social science degree, they might have done a business management degree. And when I look at those transcripts, I tend to find that the students have usually done at least around kind of 3 or 4 modules in economics during their studies, and sometimes much more, even though the title of the degree is actually social sciences. They can have done anything up to sometimes 8 to 10 modules. So I think we are flexible when it comes to the admissions, and we don't just look at the title of the degree. It is possible to come into an economics degree maybe from something that's largely a technical degree, such as, engineering or maybe a data analysis background. But definitely, I tend to find that more students that get interested in something like the MSc in Economics and EPA will tend to actually have some idea of economics from their bachelor degree. And I think that's probably broadly a good thing. Maybe just a final comment is that we do get students sometimes who have studied maybe slightly less economics and only a few modules, but have then gone on to do some work experience for a number of years in the economic space, and that is taken into account. And that's one of the reasons why I look at all the applications myself personally to try and be a fair and balanced view as an academic on whether I think that the person's capable of completing a degree like the MSc in economics.
That was going to be my next question, actually. It's not asked there, but let's talk about the application stage because you will see many different personal statements and application forms. How important is it that the student is true to themselves and although they might use artificial intelligence platforms to help them, they don't allow them to take over and become a bot rather than a human?
I think it is very important to think about what your real motivation is. And I think it's your opportunity as well to, yes, by all means, use facilities such as Grammarly that we in fact have at the university a premium subscription for all our students and staff, but use that after you have drafted the material yourself, after you've really tried to explain your profile. Yeah, especially this is important if you haven't got a standard BSc in economics, and in fact you're coming in with a slightly different profile, but you're equally dedicated to finishing this. This is your opportunity to really demonstrate why you think you can succeed. So I would definitely worry less about a couple of typos and worry more about the personal touch.
Yeah. And Rebecca, if I can come to you at this stage, what would you recommend to those students that are not sure on an application stage? Because it's a big thing, isn't it? Filling out an application form. Some people, especially if they've never moved to another country, may not know what they need to put. But what would you say to those students that are a little bit apprehensive and a little bit unsure on what to put on that application form?
I would say it from three perspectives. Now, first of all, look at Solomon, who come to us from Ghana, right? And Solomon is only one of the thousands of international students who have joined Westminster. And because of these young people's ambition and because of their enthusiastic, in learning how the global world is all about and to fulfill their dreams. So because of all these passions for career, passions to learn the world that have driven our young people to come and join Westminster. So I think this is the very first point, that is your own career, your own ambition to learn about the world. And Solomon is an excellent, fantastic example, for all the applicant students. And the second is about as we said, Westminster is a very student-centered institution. We care about our students. We not just about their learning experiences, it's also about their future career development. And there are so many opportunities, as we mentioned, Zoom 29, which opened this year, offer our students fantastic chances to get on to the future career ladder, right? So a lot of support will be here. So this is very reassuring for all our young applicants and our students.
Superb.
And
So sorry, go on, Rebecca. Go on. I think you had a final point there, didn't you?
yeah. Okay, so from personal perspective and from the university's perspective, I think, all applicants should have the confidence to come and join Westminster. So thank you.
Excellent. Solomon, if I can come to you at this point, I think obviously Rebecca's put emphasis, and you mentioned it also as well, about the great post-graduation and career service that they've got at the university. What are your plans? What do you hope to do? And I know we've already heard from you briefly in terms of what the next steps are, but obviously you've come from Ghana, you've come to the UK, you've studied at Westminster, you've got your master's potentially very soon. What's the next steps for you, and how will that career service help you and enable you to find a job?
So my next step is to get onto a PhD in economics for my doctoral studies. So what the career services, which I am already doing, is that I have a one-to-one career mentor, which from time to time I book meetings with her on Microsoft Teams, and then we discuss. So she asked me, how have you been doing the searches? We go through some interview tips, and she helps me refine my CV as many times as I want to. So the career services have been very helpful to me. For my friends that are not looking forward to go into academia, but they want to go into the industry, they've also been benefiting from the career set from the career zone because there are a lot of jobs that are advertised there. And if you have any doubts, you can still reach out to the career zone, to the zone 29 and to the student center representatives and get more assistance from them. So it's always like sometimes my friends and I we just say that they keep flooding our emails with job opportunities and career development skills. It's too much. But
Yeah.
that is the help that we are getting from the University of Westminster. It's not only about the academics, but they seek to make you work ready. Currently, I'm on a course, the postgraduate internship model, where for about say for about 7 weeks now, we've been going through getting an internship, how to get an internship, how to succeed as an intern, how to land a job after the internship, among everything. So these are some of the helps that we get from them that I am personally enjoying from that.
Superb. Thank you. Thank you for your time. Karen, if I can just give you the final word, if that's okay, just before we wrap things up. The one thing we haven't really heard yet is in terms of the intake dates and what a student needs to do to apply. So I'm presuming obviously students are now looking at September 26, if not 27. Are there interim start dates such as January, March? I know some of the universities have multiple intake dates. Talk to me about that and what a student needs to do to take the next steps.
Yeah, sure. So the codes that are up in front of you, and on the previous page as well. So if you click on any of these codes, whether it's the one for the MSc of Economics or EPA or International Development Management, you'll get onto a course page and there is a little red button towards the top which says apply. Um, and so you can click on that apply button and it'll take you to a page where it explains the documents that you need to apply for any of the courses. You can apply for more than one course. All of these courses have both September and January intakes. So yeah, depending on which of the intakes you're interested in, just make sure you're on the relevant page. But it's a really straightforward process. And I think it's already been put in the chat already, but we've got a kind of chat facility so that if anybody's unclear about some of the details of the documents, of anything else, and I think Solomon also outlined that really once you've applied, you'll be contacted by the admissions team,
Mm.
and then you'll have a point of contact. So if you have questions after that about, when do I make my deposit? What type of payment plans are available? When do I get my CAS? All of that can be asked by communicating with the person which you'll be allocated after you've made the application. So first of all, follow these QR codes, have a look at the alternatives. You can apply for more than one course if you wish. Once you've decided, click the apply button, look at the documents you need. If you have any doubts, use the chat function. And then once you've applied, you'll have a point of contact with the admissions team.
Yeah,
Um,
and that chat facility is available on every course page as well, isn't it? So any students that are not sure about anything, I can't emphasize enough, communication is the key. If you're not sure about anything, Karen, the team, everyone, Solomon, student, will be more than happy to put any worries or anything else that you're concerned about at ease. Um, Karen, thank you very much. There are links in the chat to the subject pages, to economics courses. There have been questions about funding as well. There are links to that also. But everyone that has signed up and registered to watch this webinar will be sent a copy of this video, along with any links that might be suitable also. So I really appreciate you joining today. It's been a fantastic session. To everybody participating today, those in the background also helping making this happen, a huge thank you to you. If you want to apply, scan one of those two QR codes on your screen, communicate with Karen, communicate with Rebecca, communicate with Solomon, anyone else at the team. It should be a fantastic opportunity for you if this is what you're interested in. Go and live in the heart of London, go and study in the heart of London, and have that fantastic opportunity of that career service also. But for now, a massive thank you. Thank you for watching. Take care. Bye bye.